Hello. I have here in my hands a physical copy of Unraveling by Briellejcruz. This is a monumental moment, and it's gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Like, you guys wish you had your hands on this right now. It's so pretty.
Thank you.
Coming to a bookstore near you, 2025. I think is the timeline.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Hi guys, welcome back to another writing vlog. Today I want to take you guys behind the scenes into the nitty-gritty of my process preparing for draft 2 as a pantser, basically doing a lot of the work that some people do before draft 1, post draft 1. If you're new here, hi, I'm Brielle. I've been working on a romantasy book that I'm hoping will be my self-publishing debut. Is it still a romantasy? You know, this is a question that I'm struggling with. Maybe it's just a fantasy with a romance subplot. We'll see. But anyway, I'm writing this fantasy new adult book. It is a journey book, sort of dystopian vibes and enemies to lovers romance. And we obviously are prepping for draft 2 right now. So I have a lot of updates on our progress. So as you guys probably know, for the past month or so, I've been working on annotating the rough draft. I got my rough draft printed and it is looking thoroughly annotated. This is not natural to do, but let's see. There we go. Okay, you guys get the idea, right? There's a ton of tabs, there's highlighted portions, inline annotations on both a developmental story level and on a line level. So I really went in with a pen and marked up this entire thing, and then I marked 3 different things with these multicolored tabs. So we marked story beats, character details, and world building details so that when I'm doing these more brainstormy world building parts of the process, I can instantly find all of the moments where key information is revealed so that I can add those things to my character profiles and world building documents. So you guys saw me work on this in my previous vlog. So I finished that. And then I've really been on a roll. It's been a while since you've been updated, so a lot has happened. Then I did a beat sheet. Do you guys want to see the beat sheet? I'm gonna show you just so you know what I'm talking about. Hold on. So I'm gonna create a blank version of this so that you guys don't see literally my entire book spoiled. And then I'll show you what I did. This beat sheet is based off of Save the Cat Writes a Novel, obviously, which I really enjoyed. And I'm thinking I'll do at some point just like a very overview level video about Save the Cat and sort of like the basics you need to know. Let me know if that's of interest to anyone who has not yet read Save the Cat, though I'm sure a lot of you have. I had not read Save the Cat or looked at a specific beat sheet before writing this book. So that being said, I do think I actually knew quite a lot about story structure, mostly subconsciously. One, from being a reader, obviously, and absorbing media. I think a lot of us have more knowledge and more innate instinct about story structure than we give ourselves credit for. But I did also go to film school and we learned about story structure in that context, and a lot of story structure is transcendent across mediums. So I did have some context, but I had not read Save the Cat before writing draft 1. With that being said, I was very surprised by how close I was to hitting these beats despite not having them in mind when I was drafting the book. And it was honestly such a reassuring moment of, I do have these instincts in me. Like, the story structure is pretty spot on despite the fact that I did not do this sort of beat sheet plotting beforehand, which I'm really happy to see. So this is basically how I built out the beat sheet. So at the top, I have all of my character motivations, my wants and needs, both for book 1 and the duology as a whole, because I had a revelation the other day when my friend Mick was over that, and this makes sense, right? Rhea has 2 different arcs, one in book 1 and one that spans the duology, because I started freaking out a little bit being like, wait a second, she doesn't learn what I thought was the life lesson in book 1. But then I realized, okay, that is the duology arc. She's not there yet, but she does learn a different lesson in book 1 that pretty much fulfilled her book 1 need. It's very hard to talk about all of this without specifics. Once this book is like published and stuff, maybe I can talk about the book and break it down, analyze it with more specifics. I think that would be interesting once you guys have read it. But essentially I realized there's 2 separate needs, the book 1 need and the duology need, and therefore there's 2 separate life lessons, the lessons that she learns in book 1 and the lessons that she learns in the duology. And then she also has a shallow want and a deep want for book 1, aka her motivations, her goal throughout the book. I had all of that at the top because I think that that is such a critical piece where in her perspective, we need to know what she wants, what she needs, what she's learning, the themes and stuff. And it's so interesting because I think I always shied away from themes. They kind of scared me, mostly because people would talk about knowing their themes before they even started the project, and I just didn't feel like I had that. But I think I also had a misunderstanding about what themes have to be. I think I thought that themes have to be this like grand thing of like you making some sort of commentary on the world or like politics or something. Like you need to be really saying something with the book in a very like grand sense. But what I learned through like Save the Cat and stuff is that these life lessons, these driving arcs for the book can just be what the character is learning about themselves or what they want out of life. And it doesn't need to be this grand commentary. And that really opened up a door for me. There's an entire list in this book that I found so helpful of possible life lessons / needs that your characters can have. It can be things like forgiveness, love, acceptance, faith, fear, trust, survival, selflessness, and all of this was so helpful. Like I had many a breakthrough once I realized that and kind of got over my fear of committing to themes. And I think I've just learned also that themes can reveal themselves through the writing process. Some people find it very useful to have at the beginning of their writing, but that doesn't mean that that has to be how it is for you. I think I've realized that this book actually does have some pretty strong themes, some pretty obvious themes, but they weren't things that I knew before I wrote the book. They're things that I learned through the character. So all of that being said, that's our chat about that part. And then we have the actual beat sheet. So I broke it down into Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 beats, of course. And all of this is just straight from Save the Cat. But then after each beat, I put where does this actually happen in my rough draft? And then I would put details as well. Obviously I cut those out, but I would describe what is actually happening in this part of the book. These are a little bit skewed in terms of percentage. For example, they have the setup as 1 to 10%. In my book, it's 2 to 6%. The reason for this is that I use the in media res, I cannot say that right. I use the strategy of pretty much throwing us right into the inciting incident pretty much. So there's not a ton of setup in Act 1, at least not right away. So that's why a lot of these percentages are moved up. For example, the catalyst happens at 5% instead of 10%. And then we get into Act 2. B's story is still a little bit evasive to me. There's no new characters introduced, but I do feel like there is a plot line that is introduced around this point, so maybe I'll put that in there. I mean, fun and games going perfectly from 17 to 49%. It's supposed to be 20 to 50%. Like that was kind of incredible. My midpoint is at 54%, so pretty right on par with where it's supposed to be. The bad guys close in 54 to 76% when it's supposed to be 50 to 75. So you can see, especially when we get later, I'm pretty on track with where I'm supposed to be story structure wise. So all of this felt really good. I will say some of the beats were a little bit less cut and dry compared to how they're described in Save the Cat, but I'm not seeing that as a bad thing. I'm actually seeing that as a good thing because honestly, I think with such a specific story structure, if you're hitting the beats really on the nose, making it super obvious, okay, this is the catalyst, like, okay, now we're breaking into 2, let's have a specific moment that we can pinpoint as that, I think your story could risk being a little cookie cutter or just too on the nose, too, okay, hero's journey to a T vibe. So I'm glad that a lot of these beats are like a little bit fuzzier, still identifiable, but not all of these beats need to be like a defined specific moment. And this is honestly also why I'm like a little bit grateful that I'm doing this after the first draft, is because I feel like those moments feel a little bit more organic, not having solidified them in a beat sheet like this beforehand. I think if I had done that, again, it would have felt a little bit more forced maybe. Okay, so anyway, that's what I did. And I'll put this beat sheet in a Google Doc if you guys want to adapt it for yourselves. I mean, obviously this is all over the internet, but if you just want exactly what I showed here, I'll just throw it in a Google Doc and link it down in the description if you want that. If you guys want to see a future video about like how to give your characters depth and decide what they want and need and explaining all of that, because I know it's like kind of mind hurting, let me know, because I'd be happy to do a video on that, focusing more so on the like deeper side of characters. Last thing that I want to show you guys is something that I did on a live stream the other day, which is that I created a pre-draft 2 checklist. There she is. Basically a list of everything that I want to do before we start draft 2. So this includes things such as characters and world brainstorming, timelines that I need to create, maps and lists. So basically everything that I feel like I need to go into draft 2 feeling really solid about this story. So things like a timeline of the book's events, history, a map of the main continent and the main city, floor plans of people's houses. I know that sounds really odd, but I have a really hard time visualizing houses. Just visualizing in general, not always my strong suit. It depends, obviously, but so there's certain houses where I feel like I just need to draw a floor plan, maybe get some reference photos for the style of the house. So that's something that I want to do. I have a feeling that this might leak a little bit into July, but I'm okay with that because the more I upfront this work, the less I'll have to pause during the actual revision process. I'm sure stuff will still come up that slipped through the cracks, but at least we'll be off to a good start, you know? I actually worked on this a little bit last night, so we're gonna throw it back to past Brielle to talk about what she was working on. Okay, bye. Hello, hi, hey. We have, of course, some boba. I just got my nails done. It's currently Friday night around 9 p.m. Sorry about the siren. Surprisingly, this does not happen often where I have to pause for a siren despite living in Los Angeles. Ordered some boba as my little Friday night treat because I'm not going out and doing anything tonight. I am solely chilling at home, working on the book, and I thought I would romanticize it with some boba, obviously. We know that boba is my favorite writing fuel, so this should not come as a surprise. I think you're coming from a future clip where I explained where we're at in the process. Can I just say, I truly don't think my motivation has ever been higher. All I ever want to do is work on the book, and it kind of sucks because I have not been able to dedicate as much time as I would really like to recently. So now that it's the weekend, I'm like, okay, no one can tell me anything. I need to be able to go into the writing cave and work on this book. Even if that means burning the midnight oil a little bit tonight, I'm gonna do it. Also, here is the tarot. Cheers. I hope you guys have a drink as you're watching this video. I feel like this stage of the process is a little bit overwhelming because there's so many things on my checklist, right? There's so many things I can work on, flesh out, world build, but I'm just trying to tell myself there's no right or wrong place to start. You just need to like pick something and work on that. Something I started on last night was the maps. So the maps are in progress. I made a map of Callahan, which is the continent that they are like in. I've been using the website, wait, let me find out what it is. Okay, I've been using the website Incarnate. I'll pop the spelling up on the screen. It's the first thing that came up when I searched fantasy map makers, but it also was recommended in an Anna New video, so I've been really liking it so far. It's a little like not intuitive at first in terms of the controls, but I'm pretty happy with how this map is turning out. Okay, so this is what it looks like. This is the software, and here's our map of Callahan. Let's go ahead and zoom her in. Wow. So we have Garnet, which is our capital city. Then we have Ametrine, which is where they venture to in the midpoint of the book. And then they end up all the way over here. So I added a train line as well. Slight spoilers for the book, obviously, but nothing critical. And then I added snowy mountains. And this actually helped me have some breakthroughs because originally I had them trek through the desert. And after speaking to my boyfriend and looking at it on this map, I was like, there's no way there would be desert between these two cities. They're pretty close together. It only takes them 2 weeks to travel between them. So I need to change the landscape in that part of the book, obviously. But I've realized the desert would be more like down here. They probably wouldn't encounter it. So that's that. Obviously, this has to be a pretty small country for them to be able to walk from here to here in 2 weeks. So I'm aware that it's going to have to be like a pretty small continent in actuality. But that's Callahan. So I think I'm actually changing my mind. Instead of creating another map right now, I feel like this is a great start. It helped me figure out just the general layout of the continent. I think I'm going to do more just world building type exercises. I want to flesh out location pages on Scrivener with more details about the government and the society. That's something that really I've needed to know some more specifics about for a while. So I think we might prioritize that. And then once we know that, it will probably make it easier to create the map of Garnet, which is the capital city, because I'll have all the pieces about what type of buildings need to be in this place and all of that already brainstormed. So that's what I'm thinking. I think we're gonna do some location related world building tonight, and honestly any other world building that comes to mind. I'm trying to really let myself flow in this section of the project, and if I dive into a rabbit hole, letting myself dive into that rabbit hole, because now is the time to allow rabbit holes. I'm sorry if you're hearing noise. There's like a lot of noise going on right now, above us, outside. I don't know what's happening. What was I saying? Oh yes, now is the time to dive into rabbit holes. So spending a while thinking about things like landscape, the government, the timelines of it all, this is the time to do that. So I'm going to let myself naturally go wherever my motivation and my interest takes me in terms of this project right now. If I happen to see a note in my annotations that takes me down a different exploratory rabbit hole, I'm just gonna like let that happen. So that's been my mindset during this stage of the process, and my motivation is honestly so high right now too. I'm feeling so excited about the story. I also literally just watched Insurgent, the Divergent sequel, and I never read Divergent, so I'm not like a hardcore Divergent fan, but I loved other series of that time in that same like YA dystopian boom. And so watching that just made me feel so excited and inspired, because this book has a little dystopian energy to it, and just seeing like such a loved series with so much like angst, and I don't know, it just makes me excited to tell this story. But before we get into all of that, I need to eat dinner. I still haven't had dinner, and it's literally 9:15 p.m. So I'm actually gonna watch a analysis video from Mix Writing. She did an analysis on story structure through the Shadow and Bone book, which I have not read, but I've been finding this analysis super interesting, informative. It helps me to put a more concrete example to story structure. So definitely check out that video. I'll have it linked down in the description. I'm really enjoying it. I'm gonna watch that and eat some ramen. Hopefully that will get the creative juices flowing even more. And then we're gonna go crazy and do some brainstorming.
Started into Act 2. A situation that is so completely different from the one that she started in.
Okay, food has been consumed, and we have all of our materials. I have the annotated draft. I have these two miscellaneous brainstorm world building sheet things that I worked on with Michaela. We have the laptop, including Scrivener, the love of my life, the best software in the world. We have a candle lit. I want to put some moody ambiance on the television. And of course, we have our fuel. Getting boba delivered to me is like at the very top of the pyramid in terms of possible treats. It does something for me. Okay, we're gonna put on chill coffee shop lo-fi. Where do we even start? Here's the thing. I don't even know where to start. I think here's what we'll do. We'll start by going through some of the things that I've tabbed, because I tabbed character and world building details in the draft. Let's just go through some tabs, start to input some of that information into my Scrivener file in the character and location profiles, and just kind of see where that takes us, see what we end up exploring, figuring out, etc. I'll keep you guys updated on what direction we end up going, because truly it's hard to say. We could go anywhere, but we're gonna start off by going through some of these tabs and seeing what we find. So, all right, let's do it, shall we? Okay, update. There's already a rabbit hole that I want to go down. Something that I had tabbed literally in chapter 1 was that I needed to create a timeline for the history of the government, which is something that I've known I really desperately need. And if I'm being honest, it's kind of overwhelming. So I think that's why I haven't done it to this point. I think once I figure that out, it's gonna make the world building stuff a lot clearer. And honestly, I think that's even more important than the map, because to me, it's even fuzzier than the map. So I'm gonna get a scrap of paper and just start brainstorming what that timeline can look like. I think I'm gonna take the pressure off myself to create it right away, like to create the whole timeline of the government, and just maybe try out some possibilities and be like, could this make sense? Is there anything in the book that would contradict this, that would keep me from being able to make the timeline happen this way? It's a lot to think about. I don't know. I hope this is interesting to you guys. I really wanted with this vlog to just bring you into the realities and the nitty-gritty of this part of the process, because to me, this is such an interesting part of the process, especially because I've quite literally never done this before. I've never revised a book, so I've never had to do all of this very intense pre-revision stuff. It's just interesting. I'm really enjoying this part of the process, but it is hard. It's hard. There's so many moving pieces that that need to make sense together, and this timeline needs to make sense because it's just so important to know how long has the current system been in power, how long has it been since there was magic in this location, when did they get cut off from the outside world. Since this is a dystopian-esque world, this stuff is so important. I need to know how many generations has this been happening to, how much information could realistically have been passed down. So much to think about. But let's go ahead and just brainstorm that. Okay, I just filmed or attempted to film a talking clip and then realized that the shot was so dark you could not see me at all, so we're coming back over here on this side. It's really hard to film at this time of night, guys. Basically, I'm working on the timeline. This can feel very overwhelming, right? There's little snippets of information about this sort of stuff in different places in the book, so and all of it probably doesn't even work together. So where I started was just listing some questions. For example, how long has this certain world building element been in effect? When was the continent shut off from contact with the outside world? Questions that need to be answered that I need solid responses to. So I just brain dumped any questions that are coming up related to world building, and I'll continue to do that as they come up. They don't all need to be answered now, but even just getting clarity about what the questions are and what information I need to decide is going to be super helpful. But in terms of the timeline, the idea of trying to break out hundreds of years of political history is a little bit overwhelming. So what I'm starting with is a much more concise timeline of actions that have happened during our main characters' lifetimes. And I know a lot more clearly what those things sort of were and where they sort of fall into the timeline. But what I'm doing is really getting granular about, okay, how old were my characters when these things happened? What year of school would they be in? I got clear about the fact that my main character is 6 months older than the love interest. A lot of this stuff might seem arbitrary, but I want to know that when a character is saying this happened before I went into my junior year of high school, that actually lines up and makes sense with every other piece of information in the world. So actually knowing their birthdays and how old they were when certain events happened, I think is going to be really helpful to make sure that when I mention these things that have happened in the past, it has that semblance of, what's the word? Legitimacy. That's what I was looking for. So I'm starting off with that. I'm starting off with the timeline of Varen's life, weirdly, because Varen is the one that has had more direct involvement. Having been the ruler's son, he has more sort of trademark things that have occurred. So I'm starting off with the timeline of his life. When did his father come into power? When did certain laws get passed? We're keeping it vague so that it doesn't get too spoilery. But just taking pen to paper, I'm finding really helpful. And I think this is going to continue to be part of my process, you know, these messy sheets of paper where I'm just like working things out. Like that is a key part of the process, you know? And like typing is good, but I feel like there are times when you just need to like draw and like put giant arrows and scribble in the margins and just brainstorm that way. And then once I have some of these details more solidly, of course, I'll put them in my computer so that I have a solid record of them. And also so I can update them if things change without being like, well, where was that scrap of paper? You know what I mean? So ultimately all of this will end up in Scrivener, very concise and organized but for now we're just brainstorming. So, okay, that's the vibes. I also have been talking to myself quite a bit, which I think is just part of my process. For the things that are a little bit more mentally taxing, I need to just like speak it out. Do any of you guys also do this as part of your writing process? I think it's going to become more and more part of my writing process, I'm going to be honest. Even like when I'm out and about at cafes, I find myself wishing I could speak aloud without literally seeming crazy. Because even like when I'm working on a section of the book, I feel the need to like say it out loud just to hear how it sounds, or like with stuff like this, if I'm trying to work through a roadblock, sometimes all you need is to just hear your own voice and work your way through it. It's like having someone to bounce ideas off of, but I'm the person I'm bouncing ideas off of. Although I'm not gonna lie, it would be kind of fun to work on this part of the process with someone else, but alas, I guess I'm working on it with you guys, so that'll have to fulfill the social quota for now. It's already 10 p.m. I mean, realistically, I should probably get to bed soonish. But also, like, what is the weekend for if not for staying up working on your book? Honestly, like, this is what I've been waiting for all week, is just some dedicated free time to work on this thing. Because, guys, I just want to work on it all the time now. I'm at that stage of the process where I'm just like, damn, I wish working on this book was my full-time job. Anyway, let's get back to working on this timeline. Thanks for listening to my rambles. I really hope you're enjoying this vlog and seeing the inner workings of this brain. Good morning. It is now Saturday. Welcome back. Did I stay up last night till past 1 a.m. doing character pictures and names for all of Varen's brothers? Yes. Yes, I did. And his parents. And you know what? When I said yesterday that I was just going to follow whatever was interesting me and explore it with no judgment, no questions asked, I meant it, I guess, because that is definitely not what I thought I was going to spend most of that time on. I mean, I did, of course, work on the timelines and stuff a little bit, but that's what ended up happening. And this brings up a couple interesting things. First of all, it was very interesting trying to find the right balance between names that sound fantasy-ish, but not fantasy with a capital F, if you know what I mean. Because this book feels a little bit more like urban fantasy, not like crazy fantasy with dragons and elves and orcs and all of that. It's not Lord of the Rings vibes at all. I need to find like that right balance with how I name things, how I describe things, that has that little hint of fantasy, but doesn't hit you over the head with fantasy, if that makes sense. So it's just been interesting trying to find that balance. I think his brothers' names are a little more fantasy-esque than most of the names in the book so far, but I'm pretty happy with where they ended up landing. It was also interesting because I really want all of the brothers to look very similar. It's described that they all like have a look to them. Like there's a Thane look that they all have. That's their last name. There's a Thane look that they all have. And so at first I was just looking for like, you know, character images on Pinterest, but I was like, they don't look similar enough. They need to have the Thane look. They need to look like Varen. So what I ended up doing was basically using AI tools to modify the Varen character image to just get slight variations of Varen that can work as his brothers. Now, they all probably look, dare I say, a little bit too similar, but it's enough to help me visualize them. You know, it's enough to make me think, okay, this brother is the one with slightly different eyes and slightly curlier hair. This brother has the more golden eyes and blah, blah, blah. You get the point. To me, character images are a critical part of the process, and they help me to make it feel more real and help me visualize scenes a lot better because I struggle to visualize characters naturally. So there's something that's important to me. I know some people don't really believe in them or don't use them as part of their process, but there's something that helps me a lot. So I'm glad that we got that sorted. And that brings up a very interesting topic to me, which is the idea that sometimes as the author, I think you need more information than the reader does. What do I mean by this? The brothers are never mentioned explicitly in book one, besides just mentions to his brothers vaguely. And maybe I'll add in like a few of their names in a Varen flashback, because obviously he would know their names. But Rhea, our main character, doesn't know their names, and it's all through her perspective. They never show up on page really, besides that one flashback. So is any of this information really even going to be used in book one? Probably not. I think it will come into book two, but there's something to be said for what do you need to know to get to know your characters? I don't feel like I could know my love interest Varen very well if his family was just sort of these nameless characters that I had a vague idea of. If they were just these fuzzy, smoky entities, you know, thinking of his brothers as this collective unit doesn't make it concrete enough for me. And I think this is an instance where giving yourself more context as the author can just make you feel like you know your characters better, and also make your world building and your entire world feel less shallow, because I know a lot of people can sort of sense shallow world building when they're reading a book. And I think a way to make your world building feel less shallow is to have not secrets to yourself, but extra information that you as the author know, regardless of whether or not it makes it onto the page. I feel like when world building feels shallow is when the author only knows what's on the page and has no extra context for the world. I don't know. These are just the things that I've been thinking about. I felt similarly when I started thinking more about Rhea's family. Her parents, as draft one currently stands, barely make it onto the page, but it was when I started exploring her relationship with her parents more that I really started to understand and get to know Rhea as a character. That was sort of the breakthrough moment of why is this character the way that she is, and that was critical. And some of those scenes that I ended up writing between her and the parents didn't even make it into the draft because I was like, okay, this isn't very interesting or relevant, but having written that helps me to know her better. And I think this is something that I also am going to continue to do throughout the process. Even writing scenes of past moments that are not going to make it into the book, maybe aren't even interesting, but will help me when it comes to getting to know these characters and their relationships. Writing more scenes with the parents of just like, what was a day with them like? Just having that for my own knowledge in my back pocket, regardless of whether it gets used for anything ever, just to know my characters better. I don't know. This is what I'm thinking about. But anyway, that's why it's important to me to put names and faces and traits and all of that to characters that we're not even actually introduced to in this book, because I need to know his family. I need to know where he's coming from, who he knew, you know? So yes, anyway, that's what we kind of ended up working on last night. I'm getting a bit of a late start to the day. I think it's like 11. Yeah. I woke up at 9:30, took my time getting ready, full hair and makeup, which often takes a long time. But now we're pretty much ready for the day, and I want to take myself to get an everything bagel with cream cheese, because that's something I always look forward to on the weekends, is going down to Pop's Bagels and getting a bagel. And we're going to take all of our materials for revising with us and hopefully get some more work done on the project. So that's exciting. Once again, we're just going to kind of see where the wind takes us. I think we'll start off continuing on the timeline that I was working on yesterday, because that is still one of the more critical pieces of world building, I feel, and just kind of see where that takes us. See what else we explore today. But I did pretty much round out most of the characters in terms of character profile pages and pictures and all of that. So I'm kind of hoping that we won't spend any more time on that today, but maybe those are my famous last words. This cast of characters is honestly not too crazy. It's not an overwhelming amount at all. I feel really solid, honestly, about pretty much all the characters that are introduced. I don't feel like there's any extra characters that don't need to be there. I feel like I at least have a pretty good grasp on who all these people are, so that's feeling pretty good. Also, I think this setup is kind of cute. Maybe I'll be filming out here a little bit more frequently with all the little plants and stuff. I really like it. So we're in my boyfriend's garden. I don't even know if I mentioned that. He's a little gardener, and I did in fact get him this. Is this a Bulbasaur? Don't quote me. I don't know anything Pokemon, but I did get him that little planter thing, which is pretty cute. Okay. Also, how adorable is this? Little mini watering can. It's pretty cute out here. All right. Let's go. Annotated draft. All of my chaotic papers. Laptop, which is kind of low in battery, but hopefully we won't need it for everything that we work on. Also gonna take AirPods. Sorry, I was tired of leaning over. Also gonna take AirPods because I want to listen to the book playlist on our way over. So without further ado, let's roll. Okay, hi, jumping into voice over these clips, but yes, I did go get a bagel and I did work on the book. I'm not gonna lie, there were some really obnoxious teenagers where I was sitting, so I had to put in my headphones, put on the book playlist, and I was finally able to focus. And I basically just did some brain dumping in a Scrivener page about the government and the history of the government. I just kind of threw out some ideas. I found a unfortunate plot hole, basically a world building element and a piece of the history kind of conflicted, so I had to rectify those, but it actually helped me to really flesh out and add some texture to that part of the book, so I was pretty happy with what I came up with. But we're gonna wrap up this video here because we actually chatted quite a bit, and I don't even think I realized how much footage I already had. I hope you guys enjoyed coming along with me today, and I'm excited to continue documenting the ins and outs of this process. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and comment a heart emoji in your comment. Any heart will do. And just a quick self-plug, I am offering manuscript critique services now, and I'm currently booking into the end of 2024. So if you want to hold yourself accountable for your writing projects, lots of people have been reaching out about booking in advance so that they can basically force themselves to finish their manuscripts. So I've been getting a lot of interest actually for the fall slots. So if you want to get into the books before the end of the year, definitely check those services out and feel free to email me with any questions you have about them. All right, that's it for the video. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week with another one.